G'day and welcome to another episode, another live stream of All About Branding. I am your host, Frank. As always, this is All About Branding, where I talk all about branding. Shocker. This week, I am doing something a little bit differently. I am going through 5 of the most frequently asked questions I receive and end up fielding from clients and potential clients that might not end up going ahead with branding, to help you understand what branding can do for you, where it's needed, all these fun things that are lacking in that decision-making process to get on the same page as where I am at, of what I know I can help you achieve. And it's the same kind of questions that kind of pop up time and time again in different way, shape or form, but in generalities, is that even a word? In general terms, it's a bit of a catch-all, I hope, that you can refer back to. If branding isn't something that you're looking to do right now, maybe in the future you might refer back to this. I might point you to this bit of content and you can give it a read. You can find it on Medium and my blog, or you can be watching this YouTube live stream in a replay form, or listening to the podcast, All About Branding podcast. I'm currently doing this as an Instagram live stream. Hello all, welcome to you all here that are joining live, and let's dive right in, because this is probably going to be a long one. It's longer than a typical FAQ that you'd usually have 1 or 2 sentences. I'd like to go a bit deeper with these guides and articles that I've been writing for this All About Branding series. And look, it starts with a bit of an anecdote in this guide of when I walk into a barbershop. Very weird segue to get into, but when I walk into a barbershop, it's easy. It's predictable, and it's usually delivered in a pretty consistent manner. It's a pretty consistent haircut no matter where I go. I don't need to ask questions along the lines of, I don't like my hairdo, but do I really need this haircut? Or others do this cheaper. Why are you so expensive? These kind of questions, it'd be crazy to kind of ask in a barbershop, I think, and wherever you are in the world getting your hair cut. There may be times that I want something different, but I'm not sure what that might be. If it's going to be better than the typical 2 back and sides, short on top kind of do that I go with. Though if I did, guess what? I would be I would be trusting the person that is cutting my hair, to trust in them to know what they think is best. You know, after all, it is them that does this day in, day out. I'm not the one that cuts hair for a living. Funnily enough, though, I actually did drop this on a barber when I got married, about a week before our big day, and told him it was going to be for my big day. I said, can you do a beard trim and can you do a haircut? The guy freaked out, nearly dropped his scissors and his clippers, and I just said, dude, it's all good. Just settle down. It's fine. But there aren't really many, if any, unknowns that are part of, that experience, apart from maybe the specific tools or hair products that the barber uses. There's no real unknowns there. And that's contrary to the experience. This is where I'm going with this. It's contrary to the experience that many business owners have with, or when considering, branding, which, if I'm honest, is a real shame. And that's because it's not a crystal clear service many people understand before getting into it, and make an informed decision as a result. So it's something I'd not even really considered before starting to offer my clients this service when I started G'day Frank nearly 4 years ago now. And to be fair, it's totally reasonable that there's no real given set in stone process every marketer or branding person like myself or teams, follow, or even an exact deliverable that is handed over at the end of it all. Especially when every brand is different and not every branding project will be the same or even need the same deliverables at the end of it. The crazy thing though is that most of us, branding and marketing people, have a different definition, myself included, of what a brand and branding and all the different bits and bobs that go with it mean. So it's no wonder that you, if you're a business owner and maybe even a branding person, is confused by all of this. But we're an industry here that's here to help you succeed in business. And as any kind of consolation here, the common goal is that we are trying to connect with the most viable consumers so that they buy and keep buying what it is you have to offer. So that's common. I think there's a commonality there at least to fall back on, even though we say different things about what brand and branding is. And as a result of these unknowns, no matter where you are in the world, I encounter these same questions during initial consultations with business owners and teams about their brand and the process of developing and growing that brand. So this is a guide, me fielding these questions. If you are in the process of, or you're currently thinking of, maybe this thought comes into your mind. Yep, we need better branding than what we have, but you're unsure of a few of these things. One, you actually need to succeed at, what do you actually need to succeed at minimum or at most? Number two, what you actually get as a result of branding and how much do you have to pay to get it? Now, all of these thoughts are going to be baked into 5 responses that I've got to 5 frequently asked questions that I've fielded over the last 4 years. And I hope it will be a bit of a catch-all for you to take on board and see the value in where branding can help you to make it a worthwhile investment, but also be something in your business that needs to constantly evolve and adapt. It's not just a set and forget process. So here are the 5 FAQs. And let's start with the first one. I'm going to bring it up on screen if you're listening. Oh, sorry, I should say watching on YouTube. But if you're listening, you can hear this too. First question is, do I need branding if I'm just starting out? Now, short answer for you, yes. And I say yes because, look, every business has to succeed. Every business that has succeeded, at becoming a known name to you, or you've bought a certain product or service that you've got in your hands, in your house, you use day to day, it's due to an investment that they've made, that brand that you've bought, the investment that they've made in branding and marketing to use it to their advantage for that outcome so that you buy from them. Just think about that. For some of the brands that you know and buy constantly, you buy consistently, you might feel very indebted to them. You might feel loyal to them. It could be the color that they use to stand out, the shape of their packaging, the signage of their shop, on their shop or their vehicles, the price point and placement on the shelf amongst certain other, categories of competitors. It could be the voice it uses to captivate and connect with the right people it is targeted. It could be the reviews and the testimonials it touts from its customers. So just, sharing a review that someone leaves on Google or on your site after a purchase. It could even be the word of mouth that their consumers push out to you, as a new consumer about that brand. And all of this is done for a reason. And without it, would you have known about them in the first place and bought what it is they have to offer? That is a question you need to ask yourself. Because the big part for any brand, especially if you're starting out, is to stand out. That first impression. In my last article, I talked about being distinct, and you can go back and have a listen, a read, or watch the last part 6 of All About Branding. And it's about how you can grow your brand and use distinctive assets to be able to stand out in that market. But, in short, if you're a new player standing out in the market with a service or product that is not revolutionary, it's not unique, it's not new, and a consumer could easily substitute that offering for a competitor, Ask yourself, one, how are they going to discover us? Two, how will they notice us? And three, why would they choose us over others? Especially if they know of others that have a similar thing to what we're doing. This is why I define a brand as a captivating moment of connection, because you really do need to captivate and capture a consumer's attention, especially when starting out, to stand out in a crowd. A crowd of options, a plethora of options now, both locally and globally. If not, the equation is pretty simple. You'll never be noticed. The best part of this, though, is that captivating attention is relatively easy. It's the easy part, particularly of branding. Connection, though, is the harder part, which is knowing who to connect with and how to best connect with them to make a leap and choose you over others. For this reason, my definition of brand extends into a definition of branding as a process of creating captivating moments of connection from clarity. The key part there being clarity. Push aside standing out with colors, though. Logos, with packaging, with signage, etc., just for a second. Because, yes, it's the fun part and it's the most tangible element that you're going to get as a result of branding. But just like that iceberg, that tip of the iceberg, there are going to be a number of layers beneath the surface of what you can't see that need attending to make the glitzy stuff dazzle above the surface. This is where a business plan and a brand plan, also known as a brand strategy, mix. So be shocked. Are you shocked? Be amazed or surprised that a branding person like myself can actually help you devise a business plan, or part thereof. I'm not going to say you're going to give your whole business plan, but part thereof at least, as it forms the basis of a brand plan for the direction you need to take your brand for it to grow, to make it blossom. Because what I'm talking about here is a plan for success that starts with researching the market you're entering, who you're competing with, and assessing the needs and wants of potential consumers, which is also known as research, the research phase. We then look at the types of consumers you could potentially help in detail and segment them into different groups, called segmentation. We then choose the most viable groups of customers, that's targeting, and we think of how we can position your brand to effectively capture the attention of the target, of that target that you've chosen, and be their go-to choice. And this is called positioning. Now, using all of that, we can create a list of goals to achieve that you can then measure and refer back to know if you've succeeded in the process. And those are objectives. With those objectives, you can then create actionable tactics of what you're going to do next to connect with those consumers. They are called tactics. It's things like your packaging, unboxing experience, that kind of stuff, or a refreshed brand identity. You might want to, give it a new lick of paint, a new refreshed logo, or even a total overhaul of what it is you offer there. Those are tactics in terms of what you do to develop a brand. Now, this is all bookended by how much it's going to cost and what timelines associated with that in terms of your budget. But for more detail on this process, this is what you'd call a brand strategy plan, or even a marketing plan. It's pretty much the same. I've created a guide on that. You can find it on Medium. You can find it on my blog. I've talked about it here on YouTube and on the podcast. You can refer back to those episodes. And that's really it, because the process might sound simple, and realistically it should be. You don't need to be reinventing the wheel here, but but this is something that most brands, big or small, spend time, attention, and money to get right each and every year, or maybe even less than a year, to successfully develop and grow their brands by connecting with new and existing consumers time and time again. The result of this is that it helps everyone in your team to be on that same page and market your brand effectively with a game plan everybody can follow. It doesn't need to be obvious to your consumers, but I'm talking about everybody in your team and agencies that you work with, other external vendors. Everyone understands what the common goal is. And it's why I believe that we should always be branding. Now, lastly, in terms of this question, there's one objection I have experienced a few times. And it's basically this: we don't think we need this right now. We'll invest in it a little bit later once we've got our footing when we're starting out here. Now, even if you've already got a solid footing because you might have moved your existing consumers across to a new business, new brand experience, I get that, but only to an extent. And the reason is that while it's all well and good to have an existing consumer base in your back pocket, it comes back to having a brand that keeps those existing customers around and attracts new ones. Because I'd assume that you're not just changing things up not to attract new business. Am I right? So I'll say this: if you are starting out and you don't have your footing, why not dig in and start with some clarity and have the confidence to know what your next step is going to be? To look at your market, to target the most viable market and position your brand so that when you do attract those consumers with your pretty colors, or to be able to communicate with them on their level and understanding their pain points or needs or wants, you're going to be off to a much better start rather than figuring it out kind of as you go. It's not to say you can't, adapt things over time. That's a whole other thing. But this is something I personally can't understand not needing. Unless you don't have the money to spend, which is obviously the likely deal breaker. It's okay, I get it. That said, if possible, why not factor it into your business plan if you're seeking, especially if you're seeking investment to start your business? In the same way as you would to seek investment for your premises or for the equipment you use or to get a loan to, start hiring people, all these things. Make it part of that plan to grow your business. Because the reality is that this is an investment if done right. If you do put your best foot forward here, it can make a lasting impact for many years to come. Especially if it's a brand that you don't need to change for many, many years, if ever. And more on this in terms of the ROI positive nature of branding and the value that it can create in terms of impact on your business. There is another guide article episode about that. You can find it. It talks about the 5 ROI positive ways branding can have a valuable impact on your business. So it might be worth an additional look-see. Okay, next question. That was a really long answer for that one. I'm going to take a sip as the next question comes up. Question 2 that I receive is, why does it cost more when people on Fiverr charge so much less for a logo? Look, I'd hope the previous response to the first question suggests that a brand and branding is not logo design. It can be part of the process, yes, but not always. I've done branding with businesses that not even touch their logo. Logo design, though, having said that, is the most thought of deliverable of branding. As the term comes from that act of hot iron branding livestock. It's a cruel process, I know, but putting that stamp on what you have to offer is where that branding term comes from. It's also why every person that gets into branding at one point or time will tell you, most likely in a piece of content on Instagram or LinkedIn, somewhere on social media, your brand is not your logo. It's said to death. For good reason, though. It separates the two. But yes, a logo design can be done for $25 on a site like Fiverr. No disagreements there. You might get a good one. Now, if you recall my anecdote about the barber at the start of this, I said that if I didn't know what I wanted in terms of a haircut, I'd ask the barber what kind of haircut I should get and let them decide. Most likely they'd probably table a few options and I'd choose out of them. But this is where hair cutting hair, being a barber, and branding are similar yet different. The difference between the two is that I need a haircut every 6 weeks, but a logo I'd only want to have made once if I'm lucky. Definitely not every 6 weeks, that'd be crazy. But how they're similar is that if I pay $25, sorry, I'll rephrase this. How they're similar is that I pay $25 to tell them what it is I want. My usual cut. There doesn't really need to be much conversation about it. I want this. It usually works. Let's go for it. $25, no stress. However, let's say the haircut was $25,000. I'd be leaving it to them for many, many reasons. But why? Look, I'm going to give you another kind of story here. You might have heard of this great proverb or story. I don't know what it is, how you describe it, but it's of this ship engineer that was needed and contracted to fix a massive propeller, a big cruise ship. Think massive, massive propeller, 3 stories tall that nobody else had been able to fix. If you haven't, this is the story though. The engineer goes out to the shipyard, assesses the problem, and simply gives the propeller a little ding whack with his hammer, and the propeller comes to life again. Upon reviewing this engineer's invoice, the shipping company disputes the $40,000 fee and asks for a breakdown of why it cost that much, when all the engineer did was hit the propeller with a hammer and they only spent about 5 to 10 minutes on site. So the engineer amends the invoice to reflect this request and hands it back. Line 1, hammer, $50. Line 2, knowing where to use the hammer at the precise point, $39,950. Personally, I don't think service-based businesses, as a result, charge exorbitant amounts just to fuck with you and take you for a ride. For the large part, for the most part, for the majority of people that you're going to encounter, I truly believe that. Especially for those who are professionals with the experience and, most crucially, the results to show for it. But this is the other contributing factor to why branding typically is charged at a vastly higher rate than a $25 logo on a site like Fiverr. Not dissing Fiverr. I've used it for many different things. It's fantastic for that kind of thing in those places, in those contexts you need. The reason is that the value of what is being delivered and the value that exceeds the investment is that difference. The value of what is being delivered is knowing where to use the hammer at the precise point. And in the context of branding, it's knowing what color to use so it stands out and is usable for both print and digital. Did you think about that kind of stuff? It's knowing what font in your logo is going to be legible from 200 meters away and at 20 millimeters in size, like your profile image on Instagram, because we assess the context of your brand touchpoints. It's assessing and understanding the most viable target markets to develop an offering that could be positioned at a price point that consumers are going to be willing to pay. Have you thought about that? It's then also creating a logo that won't infringe trademarks or others in your territory or industry, country. It's focusing on unique benefits and feelings to evoke from consumers to feel connected with your offering and be compelled to buy. There's tremendous value in that. And to add to all that, it's bringing your team together and helping develop a company culture that helps deliver a far better consumer experience, while even attracting and retaining the best team possible. Not to mention making sure that you're confident with the brand that you represent so that you're going to be so goddamn proud to wear it on a shirt and maybe even tattoo it on your body if you're into that. Because if you are not, how will your consumers be confident in your brand and that it's for them too? Really stuffed that last point up. I was getting really fired up then. In terms of a $25 logo, though, it's less likely to be reflective of the brand in its entirety, or be representative at least of a unifying concept that unites the message that you deliver, the internal culture of your team, where the logo is placed, Designing a logo without great context in this situation can come from, I'm going to say it definitely comes from, but it does potentially come from your personal taste or a designer's certain style, rather than typically what's best for your brand to help it connect with the consumer. Unless you've got a really good logo designer, and there are some out there, I'm not going to discount that. But if you're on Fiverr, most likely not. This isn't to say that logo design as well isn't of value. You know, it's an art unto itself, and it's why I take a tremendous amount of pride in getting to develop a timeless logo I hope that you'll never need to change. And there are tremendous logo designers out there that charge millions of dollars just for a logo. On the other side of the thing I mentioned, the value that exceeds the investment is, in the context of the ship being able to sail, say, let's say 3,000 passengers, each paying around $1,500 each for a 1-week voyage. You add all that up, that's $4.5 million. It's a 11, I'm just reading the notes here, 11,150% return on investment. You know, let alone the subsequent weeks and voyages on that return on investment. That's just 1 week. What's the cost of not doing it right? In a branding example, let's say it's a $10,000 investment, which is my typical branding fee, that attracts 5 specific types of vendors. So core target market that we've targeted as a result of that $10,000 investment in your brand within the first 12 months to, let's say it's your real estate agency. And for the 5 houses that you sell of those 5 consumers, customers, clients. So of those 5 houses that you sell for them, you help them sell, you help them resell, you help them sell, you receive an average commission of $20,000. That for 5 houses is $100,000, and that turns into a 900% return on investment. You know, it's 10xing your money. You know, let alone subsequent years as a result of that brand staying in place to attract more of those types of vendors, those buyers. You know the lingo. You're a real estate agent if you're listening to this. Now, in terms of a logo, yes, a logo like Nike's, the swoosh, cost Phil Knight, the founder of Nike, $35. However, everything else Nike has done to develop its brand for the past 50 or more years since it was designed has turned that swoosh into a $26 billion logo. Oh my God. Disconnect it though from the brand. Take the swoosh away. It's just a pretty swoosh. Any designer like myself, like someone on Fiverr, is technically able and capable of designing. Truly, that logo could have been anything from day one until 2022, or at least been a different kind of tech swoosh shape and still be worth the same. It's what has been done since to make it one of the most identifiable marks on the planet. You know, with both those reasons in mind, to put it simply, is a $25 logo of value to your business? Because that's the reason branding costs more, let alone the cost of getting it wrong, which is not just a monetary cost to you, not just wasting $25. It's also the time and attention that it's wasted. And is that worth it to your business to muck around and get it right? Or get it right the first time? That's where the value lies. Okay, getting heated. These questions fire me up. I get these questions a lot. I mean, it's one of those things in terms of branding that I hear from others like me, hear it time and time again by different people, and these questions, you know, are valid. They're very valid questions, especially when you're coming to branding fresh. You've heard of the term. You need this, but you're not sure why you're investing in it, why you're investing this sum of money in it. Could be large, could be small. Who knows? All right, let's go question 3 here. Let's bring it up. For those of you on YouTube, you can see it now at the bottom of your screen. Question 3 is, I don't like my logo and colors. Do I need to rebrand? This is the most common rationale for a business owner or team to want to change things up and approach someone like me. You know, maybe your logo was designed by your ex-business partner's nephew's friend. Let's go that far. And they were good at high school art class. All good. It happens. Maybe there's too much detail in your logo that you can't make it out on your social media profile icons. It's just too small and it just looks too ambiguous to make it out as people are kind of scrolling. It doesn't grab your attention. Business is changing. We all have, online presence needs now, and we need to adapt to those needs. That's a weird way to end a sentence. Or perhaps your colors are living in the 70s, like that Skyhooks hit song. They're an Australian rock band for those of you playing at home in the 80s. In other words, the colors are pretty drab and dated. So it's time to change the carpet and the drapes. Now, they're all pretty drastic, but hey, sometimes it's that reason. Truly. Either way, I'm all for a rebrand of your visual identity, the visual aspect of your branding, your brand identity, which includes things like your logo, colors, fonts, etc., to completely overhaul it so that it looks vastly different and might be more purposeful to how you want to connect with your consumers. Alternatively, though, a simple refresh. So you got rebrand, you got refresh. A refresh that keeps elements of what you have but modernizes things and aligns with the direction that you're now taking is a less invasive approach. It could be, for example, a more mature look to show that you've grown up as a brand. And this is something that one of our national airlines here in Australia does, Qantas. They do this every few years by slightly refreshing their visual identity and the outfits that their team wear, so their pilots and their air crew. And it also includes their logo. They've got the same jumping kangaroo with a red, tail of the airplane. But it's always slightly changed, and the font slightly changes, but it's still easily recognizable. It's very distinct, especially in Australia's market and even globally. It's just, for them, it's a new lick of paint, effectively. However, this type of question will lead me to always ask, in terms of, do I need to brand if I don't like my logo and colors? If just changing those things is simply because you don't like it. Sure. If I agree that this thing is fugly as sin and it's not serving your brand well, we'll change it up. But for some clients I engage with, there might be something, some other motivation beneath the surface. There may be things that you don't think are relevant, but once we kind of dig a little bit, we find that they might impact on your brand. So they might be worth looking at to make sure that you're going about connecting with your consumers the right way for your business to succeed. You might not have thought about your messaging. You might not have thought about targeting a certain group, or you might be targeting the wrong group that's not really viable at the moment, or in the future, it might be a dying target market. I'm not saying they're dying, but you get what I mean. So if you know that there is indeed underlying reasons, then definitely let's change it up. As I'm most likely I'm going to agree with you that you need a rebrand. Let's just start from scratch. If you think it's just the paint job, I'll still have a look under the hood just to see if things sound and look like they're running fine. If I find an issue though, I'll definitely recommend a rebrand or a refresh for certain reasons, so that you can make an informed decision and we go from there. But if we agree that it's just the tip of the iceberg that needs to, that refresh or that rebrand, we can simply work on the visual identity or a certain aspect of your brand. Okay, that one was a little bit quicker. We're getting through these. All right, we're on to question 4 now. This is an interesting one. We do a better job than our competitors, but they are market leaders. Can branding help us? This is a hard question to have the courage to admit and then ask, because every business owner wants to be, or even believes that they are the number one, and if they're not, they should be. To that, I would say, of course you should be, but what are you going to do about it if you're not? That's the follow-up. I mentioned in my response to the first question that every business that has succeeded at becoming a known name to you, or being a product or service that you have bought, it's due to an investment that they've made in branding and marketing to use it to their advantage for that outcome. Now, I've had experiences with clients where their direct competitors are like really big players, much bigger than them, that have been around for longer, and as a result have a reputable name, especially those that are franchises and multinational brands. But the kicker is that my client's direct competitor, most likely in their geographically close region to them, they offer a pretty shit service, to be frank. Or it might be a certain product or customer experience or, all of the above, which doesn't live up to that recognized name and market leading statistics that pale in comparison to what my clients offer. And that a lot of the time happens with franchise businesses, where if you've ever seen that movie about Ray Kroc and how he he didn't come up with McDonald's, but how he made McDonald's what it was and franchised it out. And the first franchises that he has in America, in the Midwest, I think it probably was, turned the burgers into tacos in certain areas and then into things that added different ingredients. And it just goes pear-shaped. And it doesn't live up to the expectation and real reputation that the brand has been put on a pedestal by many people over time. So yeah, it's a pretty shit one. It's a bit of a crap situation to be in, but it's the reality of the situation. In my last article, I talked about being distinct or different. I've mentioned a couple of times. You can always come back to it. I talked about those who talk the loudest win. Because bigger and better, more established companies typically have the reach and the money to talk the loudest and stick around more consistently in more places. But this is where your distinctiveness combined with consistency and cadence and communication can come to your advantage. This means that you can get your branding right and combine that with a solid marketing plan to show up for a particular consumer in the places that you are likely to be noticed. If you're smaller, with a smaller budget, use it wisely to connect with the smallest viable market. And as you grow, you would then target a wider pool of consumers. None of that is rocket science, but branding, including your brand strategy, as I mentioned in that first question's response, will responsively help you determine over time how you can beat your competitors in your own game. Not theirs, as you grow and pivot or widen your attention to more consumers. Now, I said your game because a few years back, I used to work in television production, of all things. I used to make big TV shows. A big part of television, though, and measuring that program's success and marketing that success is ratings. Let me tell you, you can spin the #1 rated show on television clout in so many different ways, it's actually kind of laughable. I'm not going to laugh because that would just be a bit fake. It's a bit like that scene in Thank You for Smoking. If you've seen that movie, the lead character played by Aaron Eckhart, the guy that's Two-Face in Batman and The Dark Knight, he teaches his son, the character in the movie, his character's son, to argue that chocolate is better than vanilla ice cream as a way of debating political issues to win an argument by talking about what you want to talk about, not what everybody else is talking about. So if you can see that correlation, fantastic. If not, don't worry. But this is no different to marketing your position in your market. If you know where you stand in relation to your competition, you've got odds on that you can spin it in whatever way you want. Because if being #1 or the best or the most 5-star rated brand is of value to your consumers, which it can be, especially when comparing oranges with oranges and everything else is pretty much the same, and it sways your consumers' decision-making to know that they are getting the best result, then great. There is a way of finding that to make that part of what your brand promises to your consumers. However, though, there are other ways of branding and marketing combined, bring them together, that can help you communicate that you're a better option, even without saying it. These can be things like video testimonials of consumers. Sharing user-generated content that people make about your brand, and you share that. They're going to love that. Referral programs even, and just a consistent and appealing user experience so that consumers perceive your brand as having its shit together. These things can really work to your advantage. For example, having all your social media looking well curated and designed, with your website then having that same look and feel, as well as your signage, stationery, packaging, and team apparel, all being consistent, similar color tones, logos there, fonts, that similar kind of aesthetic to give you a certain feel about what it is your brand looks like, feels like, all these things. I hope you know what I mean. This communicates a professional impression that really does say you know what you're doing without needing to say it or say things like, trust us. Don't ever say that. Or people that, the most trusted, get the word trust out of there. You need to earn it. So it's just understanding what is best for your brand that determines what is done to help your business to succeed in its market. And there is always a way, if not multiple ways, of doing it. So no matter if someone else is doing a better job, and are market leaders, you can do it with branding and then in combination with marketing and being there to show up time and time again until you get to that point of perception in your consumer's mind to be seen as the go-to choice. You don't need to be number one, just the go-to choice that they think of first. I hope that answers that question, because we're up to the last one and I'm going to need a sip of water. All right, we're up to 40 minutes. Here we go. If you stuck around this long, good on you. Question 5. Last one. What do I get at the end? What do I get for this? What do I get for this exorbitant amount of money? I'm going to try and dance around the detail a little for this question, as I've written another kind of a companion article that basically outlines how to use your brand identity. And you can find that and all the different content land bits that I've mentioned earlier in this episode, because it covers things that I help you develop and how to make use of it day to day. So this is your brand identity, effectively. So in short, a brand identity is what I typically deliver as a service for my clients as a result of a branding process, which starts in most cases with a in-depth brand workshop that we do together. That brand identity is something that you're going to likely evolve over time, but at its core, if you can keep the same essence of it and use it consistently, it's going to serve you well. A brand identity from me, in its kind of totality to begin with, comes in 3 parts. The first, I keep saying I don't know. You don't know. That's what I'm trying to do. Okay. First part is a brand direction. Second is a brand messaging. And the third is a visual identity. The brand direction is simply that, a direction to know what the brand is there to do next, so that you know what your brand is, and it's at its core, it's unifying, again, a unifying concept. What is it going to be known for, and who are you going to be connecting with so that your team has a direction to follow? So this includes things like your purpose, your values, target markets, personality, and sometimes a communication plan, a vision, and a mission. They get a bit lofty, they get a bit vague, but it might just give you some goals to set for yourself and everybody else being on the same page in your team. The second part, brand messaging, is how your brand will sound and speak verbally or written. It includes things like a tone of voice, USP or UVP. Essentially, I call it your elevator pitch, to be just straightforward. A tagline, slogans that you can use in your marketing, a story for people to kind of understand the history of your brand or where it's going or what you're trying to achieve. So it's a bit more expanded kind of thing about your purpose effectively, and other brand language that could be used as a basis for communicating why consumers should choose you. It can also be used to explain who you help and how you help them, so that you can convey who you're trying to connect with and they can feel like they're on the same page with you. Then your visual identity is your logo, made in different kind of orientations, colorways, shapes, forms, vertical, horizontal, all these kind of fun ways that you're going to get. you might lose your mind depending on how complex your logo is. Then colors, try and keep them simple. Fonts, the same. And then the hierarchy of how you use those fonts, called typography. Imagery, some graphic elements like icons, maybe patterns, and then I also add in there some supporting mock-ups. And a mock-up is just like a Photoshop thing that puts all this context of your brand identity in context to demonstrate how your brand can be used, and might inspire you for some certain ideas of what you could do to visually show up and connect with your consumers to be captivated by. It could be what clothing could look like, what your signage could look like in front of your shop. Certain branded merchandise, coffee cups or hats or shirts, and what your social media posts could look like, or maybe the homepage of your website. Just these kind of things that just really help you visualize what this could end up looking like, so that it's not just a logo on paper and you have to kind of bridge that gap between concept and reality, and you're not to know what it's going to look like until you see it in fruition, which can take months and a lot of more money. Now, there are other elements to a brand identity that I don't produce, but I can refer you on to others. Some examples of this are things like audio branding, or also known as sonic branding. This can be things like your logo title, so anything from the Apple Mac startup sound to Netflix's da-dung, that kind of stuff. Even mascot design, certain photography or videography of your brand, sort of like let's say a photographic style or videography kind of style. Like when you see an Apple or an Airbnb ad, they both look the same. You can't really tell which one's which because they use a very similar style, but it speaks of them. Animation and even unique smells as part of your unique identity. Some hotels or shops might have a distinct smell that they use to evoke that kind of attention-grabbing feeling of when you entered their premises. But in totality, I see a brand identity just the same as a person's identity that we recognize, connect with, and remember. It's multifaceted, and it's not just based on how we look, which quite frankly, for many brand service providers, I see it's all they're going to focus on, helping you with just the visual side of things. And that's okay. That might be all you need. But to look at it a bit broader of what an identity can be, that's what I offer. And to help you stay on target with this identity and even pass it on to others in your team or external vendors like marketing, photography, advertising agencies to work with, what you get in addition to the assets like your logo, files and fonts and that kind of stuff is a brand guidelines document. And maybe even a team handbook if needed to refer back to time and time again when using your brand identity so that you can utilize it correctly. You can utilize your brand identity correctly, consistently, and be understood in context when other people need to utilize it. So that's a brand identity. That's what you get at the end of working with me. There is that workshop to begin with, and that might give you some clarity. It might open your perspective of different parts of your business that you've not even considered. And it can be a very valuable process throughout it that might feel very challenging. And you might wonder where this is going or how it's going to help you. But the end result of it, if you really stick with it and you make it as part of your business that is a non-negotiable, it needs to grow, it needs to evolve. Just the same as every big business that has succeeded ever is doing, then you're going to be on the right track. Even if you are a small business, really lean into it and connect with your consumers with captivating moments of connection from having that clarity. So that is the end of my little spiel. It's not really a spiel. It's answering those questions in this frequently asked questions. They're pretty hefty responses, I know, to those 5 common questions. And you'd have thought I'd have been a bit more succinct with those answers by now, having fielded them time and time again. But as I said at the start of this is something that you can refer back to time and time again. You can come back to this on the podcast, on All About Branding podcast, on the YouTube live stream, or on the guides on Medium and on my blog, g'dayfrank.com. And I hope it serves as a bit of a catch-all, depending on your needs and the type of brand that you have, especially with some of the links sprinkled in there, especially if you go to the articles. and the ones I've referred to, that are additional resources that I've written that may be of further of further help now or after engaging in your branding, which is where you can find it on all those different accounts that I mentioned. So in the event that you'd like to get in contact with me, we can skip right past all these questions, make it brief, and get really to the root of what your ambition is with your brand to get the ball moving. My contact information you can find below in all of these different places. You can connect with me on Instagram, on LinkedIn as well, or just on g'dayfrank.com. But that is it for me for another week. I'm going to be back again in 2 weeks' time with another topic that is all about branding. It'll be part 8. And until then, always be branding. And tomorrow, it's Star Wars Day. If you're listening to this on May the 4th, May the 4th be with you. And I'll see you in 2 weeks. Catch ya. Bye.